谢 Eric。这个昨天晚上卢克文用中文演讲，我一直在那儿听他讲话，我想，这个是一个国家领导会说那么流利的中文，我希望将来有一个美国总统会讲那么流利的中文。可是我今天不用中文讲话，你知道为什么？是因为我的中文是在这儿开始学。如果我在这儿用中文讲话，我一直会听我的老师说你的发音不对的。You know, coming to Sanders Theater, it's just so many memories come flooding back. You know, I registered. You know, is freshman registration still right here? It's not here anymore. Well, it used to be right here. We had freshman registration. And I remember coming here in 1968 from a public high school in New York and being very nervous about being surrounded by all of the smart kids. And one of the things, as I was coming here today, I thought one of the things that was so remarkable about my class, and is so different about the classes today, is do you know how many ethnic Chinese were in my class? How many ethnic Chinese? And now there were only men in my class. There were no women at Harvard at that point. There was Radcliffe that was separate. So of the 1,200 students in my class, there were 13 ethnic Chinese. And I have their addresses. They published their addresses. 11 were in the United States. One was from Malaysia, and one was from Hong Kong. So that has changed so enormously that what I really would like to do today, and I think when I think about can China lead, I really think the answer is to some degree in this room. Because what you do with your lives will be incredibly important in whether China can lead. So what I'd like to do is really talk about vision, just briefly, talk about failure, and talk about our obligations to society because of what we've been given. And first I want to set the record straight about something. If you ever Google me and look at all the interviews, all the media, the Chinese media and the U.S. media always say, 欧伦斯你非常有这个远见，非常有远见。你1970年就开始学中文。Wait. It's not true. I didn't have the vision. In fact, in 44 years, next Thursday, it's a week from Thursday, on May 1st, 1970, I decided I was going to start studying Chinese, and it had nothing to do with vision. It actually had to do with values. I grew up in a family like many of you will grow up in families or have grown up in families. My mother was an immigrant to the United States. My paternal grandparents were immigrants to the United States. And they used to tell us, but for America, but for the American government, you don't exist. You were never born. So you owe the American people, you owe the American government an obligation. And when I was growing up, I wanted to go to West Point. I thought, Xidian Zhengxiao was the best way to serve the country. But something called the war in Vietnam intervened. And I got very involved in the protest against U.S. involvement in the war in Vietnam. And now I know Professor Kirby knows and a few other people know, but on May 1st, on April 30th, 1970, the protest in America erupted because President Nixon decided to invade Cambodia. And Harvard was totally torn apart by that protest. All the windows in Harvard Square were broken. School was in turmoil, and school was canceled. The remainder of the semester was canceled. I was a student, I was a sophomore, and I went to my professor of Vietnamese history, Alex Woodside, and I said to him, I want to understand why good people make what Jung Fu, do bad things, the war in Vietnam. I want to study Vietnamese. He was very busy. So he said, oh, Steve, study Chinese. You'll understand more, and I'll get you a fellowship. He left. And then he said, wait, come to 1737 Cambridge Street, just right down the street, and you can fill out a form. So the next day, I went to his office. He wasn't there, and I was just about ready to leave. And his secretary saw me and said, are you Steve Orlins? And I said, yes. And she gave me a form, and I filled it out, and it was a form for a National Defense Foreign Language Fellowship, which I then gave to her, and I went home. Now, semester ended 1 month early, so I had a great job when I got home. I was putting groceries in bags at the supermarket. That was my job. That's what a Harvard sophomore got to do. He got to bag groceries. So I come home one day, and there's a letter from the Defense Department, and my mother is crying. You know why? Because I'm going to have... So she was very worried, and I open it, and it's, of course, the fellowship, and I started studying Chinese, but it wasn't about vision. I didn't have a vision of what was going to happen. I was doing the right thing, but it wasn't really about vision. So what I say to you is, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You can't have a vision which is going to show you the next 20 or 30 years. So many of you come in to see me, and you say, I'm not sure. Well, my response is often what the Nike ad is. Just do it. Just do it. Everybody knows Michael Jordan, I hope. You all know Michael Jordan? I'm not hearing anything. Do you know Michael Jordan? The basketball player, the greatest basketball player ever in American history, even better than Yao Ming? He has a quote which I love. He says, I've missed more than 9,000 shots. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I failed over and over again in my life, and that's why I succeed. And I think that's so true. When Eric was reciting all of my accomplishments, I said, that's pretty short, but if you listed my failures, wow, 会很长. I always think back to when I graduated, then I went on to the law school here, and I had a great run for a number. I was in the State Department, and I had the great experience of working on the establishment of diplomatic relations. I was very fortunate to get to run Lehman Brothers Asia. And then I came back to the United States, and I decided, kind of, I wanted to go back to where I was grown up. And I decided I was going to run for political office. I thought the United States needed a Chinese-speaking congressman. So I ran. I left Lehman Brothers, and I ran for Congress. And I just had such a good run for so many years. I thought I could do the impossible. I could win. And I went from 40 down in the polls to 30 down in the polls to 20 down in the polls to 10 down in the polls to, in the days before the election, even. It was even, and I was so excited. On the day of the election, all the cameras came, ABC, NBC, CBS, they were all there, because this unknown me was going to be elected to Congress. And 300,000 people voted in that election in my district. and I fell short by a few thousand votes. And one of the things about defeat in politics, it's like defeat in sports. Sports and politics, you can't hide. Everyone knows, it's in the front page of the newspaper. Everybody knows you failed. Everybody knows. So there's nothing you can do to hide. But what happened then? What happened from that day on was I went on to a new career from Lehman. If I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have left Lehman Brothers. I probably would have still been there when it went bankrupt. But I went on to a new career which opened up so many other possibilities for me and made my life so much better, and in so many ways allowed me to do what I do today and make this contribution to the U.S.-China relationship. You know, the Chinese always say, 失败是成功的之母. And it's true. So I would also say to you, my second point is really, don't fear failure. It's good to fail. I've learned more from my failures than I have from my successes. And it's going to take you to places where you're going to be able to make greater contributions to whatever it is that you want to do. Bill Gates, when he spoke at Harvard in 2007 at the graduation, quoted my hero, John F. Kennedy, when he said, "To those whom much is given, much is expected." I would say to all of you students, you have studied or are studying at the finest institutions in the United States, the finest institutions of higher learning. Many of you have studied at the finest institutions in China. You have benefited from the decisions made by the Chinese government and by the American governments that have allowed you to experience this extraordinary education that you were giving. My parents, as I said at the very beginning of this talk, taught me that without the American people and without the American government, I would not exist, and I would not have the opportunity to receive the education and make the contributions that I've made. And I would say the same is true for you. You have an obligation to serve the U.S.-China relationship because you have benefited from it more than almost anyone. Because that relationship has prospered over these 44 years, you are being offered the greatest opportunities imaginable. I couldn't have imagined those opportunities when we established diplomatic relations in 1979, but they're now in front of you. And when you do the right thing, when you make the right decisions, I am sure 明天会更好。谢谢各位。我就补一句话。For those of you who are still students, on May 28th to 30th, the National Committee holds a foreign policy colloquium in Washington, D.C. to educate you about how American foreign policy is made. So those of you who would like to attend, American corporations believe it's important, so they support this activity. So you come, you live at GW, you interact with other Chinese students, and interact with the U.S. foreign policy establishment in the United States. So if you're interested, you can go to our website, ncuscr.org. Otherwise, I have some flyers, but 谢谢各位。